Right. So, so yesterday I had given a brief introduction about rural communication, the subject itself, and how important it is, and what are its very highlights and features. Okay. Now let us go into the subject. Let me just give you an introduction. Rural communication is an exchange of information, knowledge, and skills among the people living in rural areas through interpersonal communication, mass media, information and communication technologies, and traditional folk media. Even after rapid, hello, hello, hello,
Yes, sir.
there's some
Hello, sir.
disturbance. There's some disturbance. Okay. So again, I'll just repeat. Rural communication, I'm just reading out the introduction, okay? And if there's any doubt, please do ask me. Please let me know whether you have been able to understand or not, okay? So let it not be a one-way communication, okay? Now, rural communication is an exchange of information, knowledge, and skills among the people living in rural areas through interpersonal communication, mass media, information and communication technologies, and traditional folk media. Yesterday, I think I explained to you what exactly interpersonal communication is, mass media, ICTs, and traditional folk media. Even after rapid urbanization, which India is witnessing, 65%, that is according to the World Bank, live in rural areas. There is a huge scope for development and the need for bridging inequalities in villages, especially when it comes to communication. You know, most of the communication, whether even the content of communication is mostly urban specific. And we never used, now of course the scenario has changed, but never, there was not much of an emphasis on rural segment or the rural areas or the rural sector. Okay. Now, of course, it's all changed now. Now, there is a huge scope for development and the need for bridging. What do you mean by bridging is trying to minimize the gap, minimize the communication gap between the communicators and the rural sector. Okay, for bridging inequalities in villages. The main objective of rural communication is to empower people with the required information and knowledge so that they would make an informed decision. Okay, this is to create actually the very basic aim. Yesterday also I was talking about it, is to actually create awareness among the rural populations and also make them aware about the latest technologies, and they make them about the changes that is happening across the world as far as agriculture segment is concerned, and also the society is concerned. So this is why there's a need to communicate to the rural people. Rural communication takes place in a non-linear process by providing information to the public. By receiving communication, rural people, just remember that communication means we are talking about various ways of communicating or conveying messages or conveying some information to the rural people. Okay, through different means. It could be the electronic media, it could be digital media, it could be radio, it could be, or it could be also, you know, various print media or through posters and through various all these ways of communicating or conveying messages or information comes under the umbrella of communication. Means communication comprises all these different communication tools. Okay, communication tools are the television is a very powerful communication tool, and print media, the newspapers are a very powerful communication tool. Likewise, the latest technologies like what we call as information and communication technology, like digital platforms, the websites, and right now we are also talking, interacting through Zoom. So these are all communication tools from where if we want to communicate to the rural population. Okay, and who are the basic communicators? Basic communicators could be you and me, or it could be the policy makers, it could be the politicians, it could be the government, or it could be the scientists who are doing various agriculture-based research. So these are the institutions that could communicate whatever is happening as far as the rural sector is concerned, or for the development of rural sector. Okay, by receiving communication in any mode, whether it is radio, television, or any mode, rural people will be able to realize their potential through training and education, and succeed in their personal lives through the profession they practice. Exposure to communication is not equal. Okay, like sometimes the rural populations do not have access to information. Okay, and they do not have access to information that they need. There is a lot of communication happening, but if the rural development has to happen, whether socio-economic and cultural development has to happen, it needs to be more focused on these areas, right? The main objective of rural communication is to empower people with the required information and knowledge, so that they would make an informed decision. Rural communication takes place in a non-linear process by providing information to the public. By receiving communication, rural people will be able to realize their potential through training and education, and succeed in their personal lives through the profession they practice. Whatever profession they are practicing, like agriculture profession and various agriculture related professions. It's not just about farming. We are talking about various occupations of the rural people. It's not just farming, it is not just agriculture. It could be different occupations or different economic or occupations, right? Exposure to communication is not okay. Exposure to communication is not equal to different sections of the society. Okay, not everyone has an exposure to communication, and even if there is communication happening everywhere, it is not equal. It is different sections of society require different kinds of communication, different kinds of information. Okay, it's not just trying to say something and then. So we have to, as communicators, we need to always keep in mind one thing: who are we communicating to? Who is our target audience? According to that only we design the communication message or information, isn't it? Yeah, so it should be the communication as far as rural areas are concerned. You need to be specific to their lifestyles, their culture, their traditions, their agriculture practices, their other economic activities. It should be specific to that. Okay, so exposure to maybe you are communicating, but then is it really happening? Should be we need to look into that. Okay. Then what? After exposure to communication is not equal to different sections of the society. By and large, the rural population hails from socio-economically disadvantaged sections of the society. Disadvantage in the sense, they may not be exactly having access to information, or they may be economically, maybe they are not, able to actually take care of their own requirements, own needs and requirements. Okay, so they are at a disadvantage because they are economically also weaker, right? In rural areas, oral tradition and traditional knowledge is a vital part of their cultural identity. Means oral tradition, like most of the communication happens through interpersonal or without the any kind of media. It is direct communication. They speak directly to the people. The communication is conveyed directly to the people, or it is done orally, right? So the communication needs of rural India are different from urban India. People in rural India are illiterate, semi-literate, or have functional literacy only. Of course, this is all changing, but then nowadays, what is happening is, like I told you yesterday, most of the rural population are becoming literates. Okay, they are not anymore illiterates. Okay, their older generation could be illiterates, but then the young generation most of them are literates. They are getting educated. Okay, so this may not be exactly true in the present situation. People in rural India are illiterate, semi-literate, or have functional literacy only, or basic literacy. So communicating with them needs empathy and understanding of their worldview. Means the person who's trying to communicate, be it a policymaker, be it a politician, be it a scientist or be it an extension worker who directly interacts with the rural people, they need to understand the requirements of the rural people. Then only the communication will be effective. So these things needs to be kept in mind when you're actually communicating to the rural people. Okay, so communicating with them needs empathy. Empathy is an understanding of their worldview, and we need to understand the culture, their lifestyle, their practices, their traditions, their beliefs. All these things you need to be actually if you are a communicator to the rural populations, you need to understand their culture, their tradition, their lifestyle, their occupation, their agriculture practices, all these things and their requirements. Okay, then only you can be a very good communicator, and then only your communication, whatever it is, will be understood by the rural people. And not only that, then only they'll also uh, interact with you. Okay. On the contrary, if the welfare and development programs are explained to them by an opinion leader, who is an opinion leader, whom they trust, then it is accepted without much hesitation. In a village scenario, you have some elders, village elders, and all people who the entire village respects and listens to, or this village elder or a person who is very popular among the villagers, they are advise the villagers about various things. So they are also called as opinion leaders. Means most of them listen to them, most of them believe them, most of them identify with the opinion leader because the opinion leader belongs to their own village. So if the welfare and development programs are explained to them by an opinion leader whom they trust, then it is accepted without much hesitation. Thus, in rural areas, interpersonal communication is more effective than mass communication. Okay, this is because this is called as interpersonal communication. Like they directly go to the people, opinion leader directly goes to the villagers, speaks to them personally, have a meeting. Okay, they have meetings, they have certain at certain places. The opinion leader talks to them about so many aspects, right from the policies of the government to the agriculture practices. They would always be advising the villagers. He is the most respected person in the village. So everything that he says is understood and uh, also followed. Okay. Thus, in rural areas, interpersonal means is directly communicating to the people, uh, to his villagers. So it is interpersonal communication is more effective than mass communication. No doubt, mass communication brings awareness to welfare and development programs. Okay, brings welfare to welfare to awareness to welfare and development programs needed for rural communication. Okay, so this is very important. Mass communication does definitely all this is forms of mass communication like print media or the electronic media or the radio or various other tools of communication. They actually communicate to large populations. Okay, and so it's also very powerful. These media like electronic and print and television, these are very powerful medium of communication because it reaches out to a lot of people, huge audiences, huge populations. So it's a mass communication, it's a very powerful mass communication tool. Whereas interpersonal communication is more what we call as they are close to each other, they have proximity. A person who's known to the community will speak to them, and they also are quite respected, and they speak these in a language that they can understand. Okay, so no doubt mass communication brings awareness to welfare and development programs needed for rural communication. So of course mass communication is also one of the game changers we call it. It has brought about a lot of transformation, transformation in villages. Okay, now let us go to the next. The social structure in rural India is based on caste. Okay, Each caste has unique rituals, customs, and rites. So sometimes traditional communication and folk forms have to be used to drive home the message. Okay, so you are now, you are all going to be communicators. You are all going to be, mass communicators, or you are going to be interpersonal communicators, whatever role you are going to take up. You need to understand the rural structure, the social structure, as I told you earlier. The social structure in rural India is based on caste. Each caste has unique rituals, customs, and rites. So sometimes traditional communication and folk form. So nowadays, television antennas are found in remote areas, be it tribal hamlets uh, or villages. Traditional communication is all about, you have all those harikatha, burakatha, and various other folk forms through which there was, in the good old days, they used to narrate a lot of stories, lot of like Ramayana and Mahabharata and various other stories. But now they have, even the folk artists in villages have assumed a different role. They are also communicating development messages. They are also communicating different kinds of social messages. They are also communicating social evils, how social evils can be prevented. So many, they have taken a different form nowadays. And these are all traditional forms. Okay. I'm just giving you an example like Harikatha or Gurakatha or various other folk forms. Okay. So nowadays, television antennas found in remote, now that's all long time back. Now it's all changed. Audiovisual communication is also effective in communicating important messages. It can bring awareness among the target public on an issue campaign. Central and state governments use their information and communication infrastructure to publicize their welfare and development programs. Okay. Now, the Bureau of Outreach and Communication, that is, in short, it is called as BOC. The Bureau of Outreach and Communication is disseminating information at grassroots level too by exposure to appropriate communication. Knowledge and skills can be acquired through which people live happily in the community. So this is a brief picture of rural communication, introductory part of the rural communication, and we speak about what exactly is rural communication, why, how rural communication can be effective, which is the most effective communicator, like if you take traditional media or the folk media or the mass media or the opinion leader. So this chapter has explains about all these very important components of rural communication. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, then I'll proceed. Communication needs of rural India. A major part of Indian population lives in villages. India has over 5 lakh villages spread over 28 states and 8 union territories. Few villages are closely connected to nearby cities and towns. Others are in very remote areas without any proper road connectivity. In the last 75 years after independence, India made progress socially, economically, and politically too. Of course, there are few states whose development indicators are far behind sub-Saharan countries, means other underdeveloped countries. Indicators of rural India in health, education, employment, opportunities, law and order, women empowerment, environment, malnutrition, female infanticide, and birth rate are not very appreciable and uniform. Okay, probably it could be due to a lack of awareness and low exposure to mass media or no aspirations to improve the conditions of the lives. Okay, so these are some of the faults within. There are a few deficiencies as far as the rural area is concerned, which is not being addressed to by the media or various other channels. So there are certain deficiencies, and because of a lack of proper communication or inaccess, means sometimes they don't have access to the right form of communication. So many of the problems had been persisting or continuing in the rural areas because of lack of access to proper communication, or important or relevant communication which is of use to the rural population. Okay. Indicators of rural India in health, education, opportunities, law and order, women empowerment, environment. See, these are some of the areas which still there are some problematic areas which still continue. Okay. And birth rate are not very appreciable and uniform. Probably it could be due to a lack of awareness. Naturally, it could be due to a lack of awareness and low exposure to mass media, or no aspirations to improve the conditions of their lives. The worldview of villagers is embedded with superstitions, rigid customs, traditions. Generally, mass media increases the aspirations of the viewers. Okay, aspiration in the sense it does definitely give a lot of information that the rural populations can use. Okay, and also increase the knowledge of the rural population, and also they'll also be aware about the state of art practice, agriculture practices or technologies. All these things can be done through the mass media. Okay, and the villagers are more informed nowadays, of course, because of the revolution that happened in the digital media, and I mean digital media revolution. Now the rural populations are more informed. They are more aware about their rights and responsibilities. They are also more about their agriculture practices, and they are also updating their knowledge. So this is definitely happening in the rural areas. But the attitude of villagers is not progressive, as they don't adopt the latest innovations without persuasion and remain happily in the status quo. Okay, whatever information, even if the there's a lot of technologies, agriculture technologies, and agriculture practices which are actually going on getting updated. Means it is the latest agriculture practices. The villagers are not prepared to take it up because they are more tuned into their own age-old practices, and they are means, in one word, I can say that they are many of them could be change resistant. Means they don't want to change, or they are very reluctant to change, or they find that changing would disturb their routine lifestyle, so they don't take it up until the communicators try to pursue them or persuade them and talk about the advantages to take up new technologies, new practices, and update the knowledge. Okay, during the Green Revolution, pulse polio campaign, and COVID-19 vaccination drive, there was a lethargy and inaction from the villagers due to social stigma, superstitions, and misleading apprehensions initially. Of course, this did happen as far as even COVID, but then during COVID, it's not just the rural areas, even the urban areas did have certain apprehensions about it, right? About taking the vaccine, or okay, these things do happen even in urban areas. It's not just confined to rural areas. Now, let's go to the Green Revolution. One of the most it was a landmark kind of a event or situation where the Green Revolution brought about very huge quantum increase in output. Okay, and because of that, farmers became more dynamic and more active, and they started taking up certain practices that increase their output. That is why it is called as a Green Revolution. Okay, radio clubs were established during the Green Revolution. Now here is where the communicators played a very important part. During the Green Revolution, radio clubs were established in villages to discuss farm-related content broadcast in radio programs. Okay, mass media and folk media can complement interpersonal and group communication if socio-economic and political change has to be brought. Apart from policy initiatives, communication has to be effectively crafted and used to motivate the public. Okay, so it is not just saying something just like that, just out of a just trying to for the sake of communicating a message, don't do it. Every communication message should be properly planned, properly designed, so as to, and it should be appropriate for the rural populace. It should interest the rural populace. It should be relevant to the rural populace. Then only your message will be effective. Okay, some of the messages which are not relevant to the rural populaces or their economy or their lifestyle or their culture, it won't interest them. So you need to actually, as communicators, you need to design content that is, useful for the rural segment. Okay. Communication has to be effectively crafted and used to motivate the public to adopt them. Governments from time to time have formulated and initiated several rural development projects. Mass media tradition, interpersonal and group communication are used to bring awareness among the beneficiaries. The communication needs of rural India vary from, of course, because India is a diverse. We have diverse cultures and diverse, practices, diverse lifestyles. We have a kind of a diversity. So from region to region, socio-economic conditions of the family vary, and communication is like the communication needs of rural India is different from region to region. Okay, it's not the same. It is not uniform, and socio-economic conditions of the family. Communication is exchange of messages and provided a useful categorization of the information needs of the rural population. Information for increased productivity and income growth, example, when, where, and how to. So these are the various forms or various communication requirements of the rural populations. So one, I'm reading out. Information for increased productivity and income growth. When, where, and how to obtain seeds, fertilizer, pesticides, mechanical equipment, and other farm inputs. Price quotations, suppliers, credit facilities, and clear information about the procedures to follow for application, the amount that can be borrowed, the nearest officers for processing application, information about how to voice a complaint, legal advice, current prices of farm products, and the marketing situation. I did just briefly mention what the communication requirements are. So they need information, one, for increasing the productivity, isn't it? How to increase my productivity, how to increase my, say, so for example, a farmer has about 2 acres of land, and maybe he's getting only about 100 quintals. Now he wants to increase it to 200. So, but he doesn't know because he's been practicing the same old way and he's getting only 100 quintals. So he would always like to increase his productivity. So he will be definitely seeking information about how to do that, how to increase my production to 200 quintals from, or 200 kgs, whatever it is, to from 100 kgs. Okay. And then he'll also want information about how he can increase his income from the output, from the produce, from the production. Okay. Suppose he's getting, about 100 rupees for 100 quintals, then he would like to know how he can get 200 rupees for 100 quintals. Okay, how he can actually increase his income. When, where, and most important parts is, where do you get the right kind of seeds? The farmers would like to know where he or she would like to get the right kind of seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, mechanical equipment, and other farm inputs. Okay, so that kind of information is required by the farmers. So you need to, as communicators, you need to give that kind of information to farmers. That is what, so you have to design your communication content, I mean, message, according to the requirement of the farmer. You would say that you can increase the productivity by, implementing all these practices, some of these practices, so that you will increase your productivity. Then you can say you can increase your income growth by doubling your output, okay, or doubling your quality, or trying to find the get the best quality product. Okay, then when, where, and then you can also tell, as a communicator, you tell them where to get the seeds, where to get the right kind of seeds, where to get the fertilizers, pesticides, mechanical equipment, and other farm inputs. And also price quotation, which is very important. where to find the suppliers, credit facilities. They want to know whether banks are how they can access credit facilities of being extended by the banks, and also they also need clear information about the procedures to follow for application. Like if they have to apply for a loan, how do I actually, what kind of procedure I have to follow? What is the requirement? Whether they are qualified to apply for a loan? All these aspects should be told to them, should be informed to them. Okay, that is the role of the communicator. The amount that can be borrowed means what is the loan amount that can be borrowed from the banks, the nearest officers for processing. So where they, like nowadays you have like if you Google your on the Google, if you say so and so office, registrar office or whatever office, agriculture office or something, then you get the nearest office. Likewise, that kind of information is required. Then apart from that, they would also like to know how to voice. Suppose they have some complaints, the rural populations have some complaint. They would like to know how they can actually voice a complaint or register a complaint. They also would be requiring legal advice, the current prices of farm products, and the marketing situation. So all these are very relevant information that is required by the rural populations, and the communicator should keep all this in mind to give this kind of relevant information. Okay, information on rural non-farm economic activities, food processing and baking. Okay, this is also very important information that they can that should be given to the rural sector or the rural populations. Information on rural non-farm economic activities, example, food processing and baking, textiles, services such as hairdressing, shoemaking and repair, on all this, woodwork, metalwork. All this is information is also required by them. Of course, now you have even the rural populations are able to access the and all this information on the Google also. So there is a lot of information that is now accessible to the rural segment. This also included information about requirements for engaging in these activities. Hello. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Because I'm not getting any response, so I thought maybe, yeah. So these are the yeah. You just give me a moment, okay? I'm just coming. I've got a phone call. I'll just come. Okay, one moment. Yeah, sorry. So we need to give this kind of information to the rural segment, the information that they require. Okay, and this is also information required. This also included information about the requirements for engaging in these activities. Like you have to have the capital, that is amount that is required to be invested, the equipment that needs to be purchased.
Huh?
Hello? 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 Yeah, is my audio clear?
Clear, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So all these aspects are very important for, capital is required. How do you get the capital? The rural agriculturist or requires all this information about capital, equipment, training systems, processes involved, including new and improved techniques, standards and designs and availability of appropriate technology, information for social amenities, sources of safety. See, this is all these are the uh, information required by the rural populations. So if you are a communicator, or if you are an extension worker, or if you are if you are in the media writing about agriculture, you need to understand that this is you need to understand this is the kind of information that needs to be given to the rural people, because it is relevant to them. Okay, it's not just about agriculture, it's also about the social life, it's also about how you can start a food processing industry. All this information needs to be given to the rural segment. It was also about how a farmer can take loans, what is the process of what is the qualification required for taking loans, and what is the background, and all this information through the media you need to give. Okay, then this is the form of communication that is important for the rural. Are you able to follow? Please give me a feedback. Hello? Are you able to follow? Is
Following,
it clear?
sir. Clear, sir.
It's clear, is it? Okay.
Yes, sir. It's clear.
మీకు ఏదైనా డౌట్స్ ఉంటే అడగండి మధ్యలో, ఎందుకంటే then I'll be sure. Okay. Now let us go to, yeah. Many welfare and development programs have failed. See, this is a very important part of why many development programs have failed. Okay. Many welfare and development programs have failed due to improper communication, planning, and communication itself was not planned properly or not implemented properly. Because of that, many programs, development programs and welfare programs have failed and have not been, it's not exactly reached the people who they are actually, the beneficiaries rather. It was not the welfare programs and development programs was not able to reach the beneficiaries, or the beneficiaries failed to take advantage of these programs because of improper communication planning. And without any planning, you try to communicate. Without any plan, you need to plan the content, isn't it? What kind of content will you, suppose it is welfare program, you need to write, or you need to telecast. If you're telecasting, you need to tell them how exactly the welfare programs are being implemented. But since it was not properly communicated, programs have failed. Okay. Only when awareness is brought on the welfare and development programs, and people and the rural populations are motivated to utilize them, then only real development can take place, isn't it? Only when awareness is brought on the welfare and development programs, అంటే ఒక కాన్షియస్నెస్, ఒక అవేర్నెస్ తీసుకురావాలి వాళ్ళు తీసుకొచ్చినప్పుడే, and then only is brought on the welfare, and then only the rural development can take place. Communication can motivate the common man. For this to attain, a thorough diagnostic study has to be done to find the communication needs of rural India. Later, appropriate planning has to be evolved and implemented to realize the objective of development. Okay, some of the programs are SITE, it is then KEDA and JABO. There are many, programs, many experimental programs that have been launched by the government to create awareness among the rural populations. Okay, one of them is SITE, that is Satellite Instruction Television Experiment, and then you have KEDA program. Then we'll be thinking about it in the later chapters also, and JABUA communication projects. There were some of the projects which are successfully conducted, and summative research has established differences in, means after these programs, some of these programs in certain areas were launched. There was a survey done and research done which showed that it has created a difference in awareness levels of the targeted audiences, right? Challenges for rural communication, framework for effective rural communication development, FAO UN. So now we'll come to the situation concerning communication in rural areas of developing countries is characterized by, okay, There's the situation concerning some of the examples. Okay, a dearth of information means absence of there's no scarcity of information. Okay, one of the major factors is uh, scarcity of information reaching the rural segment. That is absence of providers. That is and local communication content. One of the major findings was because there were no information providers. That means providers mean information providers and local communication content. So there was no localized communication content. The second the second reason was conflicting messages. Like your message, the way you have actually designed the message was conflicting with each other. That is difficult to know what is relevant and correct information. Okay. Then a fragmented market for information with many individual clients. So these are some of the problems that was that caused a lot of communication gap and which had failed to many of the programs have failed to take off because of these factors. Okay, there was also one of the major reasons for lack of communication or lack of the communication gap or difference, or whether the failure of certain programs is a lack of well-developed information and communication technology infrastructure and low levels of ICT skills. In rural areas, the public communication requirements and available channels are transforming structural changes. Farmers must be market oriented to sell their produce. Farmers need to cultivate their farming scientifically. Again, we are again talking about the requirements. In rural areas, the population's communication requirements and available channels are transforming structural changes. Farmers must be market oriented to sell their produce. Farmers need to cultivate their farming scientifically to get the best yield at an acceptable cost. Nowadays, farming is not economically viable, so alternative livelihoods have to be found to change their profession. So these are some of the very crucial points that is required to be communicated to the farmers. Okay, now patterns of, we are going into the third part, patterns of rural communication. People in rural areas use mass communication tools. These are all mass communication tools, okay? Newspapers, magazines, booklets, pamphlets, television, radio, interpersonal communication, neighbors, extension agents, and information. Okay, information communication technology, that is extra. Like all these tools are used for communication. Information about new agriculture practices, weather reports, entertainment, local news, national news, general community problems, farm market prices, social activities, community development and welfare programs, etc., is gathered from various sources. So these are the crucial areas where information requirement is there. Okay, and the content should be focused on these areas. Okay, so there's a wide variety of requirements for the farm population, rural population. I'll read it again. People in rural areas use mass communication tools, newspapers, magazines, booklets, pamphlets, television, radio, interpersonal. All these are mass communication tools that communicate to the rural areas. Okay, even extension agents and information communication technology. Information about new agriculture practices, weather reports, entertainment, local news, national news, general community problems, farm market practices, social activities, community development and welfare programs is gathered from various. These are all information requirements and information that is conveyed to the rural people. Generally, mass media use mass communication. Okay, that is one part of it. Generally, mass media used by people living in rural areas for information, entertainment, education, and socialization. Okay, rural people read newspapers, listen to the radio, watch television for edutainment. Means it's called as edutainment because it's a combination of education and entertainment. Or you are trying to educate a rural segment through some entertainment format. Okay, and use communication technology for exchanging information and also gathering it. Nowadays, social media is also used for information, education, and entertainment. Social media is also illiteracy barrier in rural areas and has become popular due to its content. Also, due to its content, due to cheap internet availability, people in rural areas are also able to use social media and also become penetration of the now, initially there was no access to internet in the rural, not only rural, in many parts of India. Rural was absolutely, there was no access to internet. Now the internet penetration is almost it's reaching almost every part of India. Okay, because of internet penetration, there's a lot of information flow that is happening. A lot of exchange of information is also happening. The rural populations are getting on their mobiles, they get the latest information on weather, the marketability of the products, the market scenario, the prices, everything is accessible to the rural segment now because of the digital media revolution and the very, because of the not only revenue but also the availability uh, of the technology at the grassroots level. So even at the grassroots level, the rural populations are now able to access all kinds of information. Okay, so now we are observing a lot of changes happening in terms of awareness among the rural sector people, among the rural populations, not only socially but also economically, but even also scientifically, and they are updating their knowledge. They are now able to understand the markets. They know how, where to sell the products and which product is more fetching or more get which product gets more price, and where do they get, where to position their products, and who are the buyers of the products. All these things are now available after the because of the internet accessibility. Initially there was what we call as a digital divide, but now it is all means those who have access to internet and those who do not have access to internet. It was very huge. Now the digital divide, the gap is reducing at a very fast pace. So naturally you have all this advantages. The rural populations are now getting themselves updated about the, not only about the latest technologies. Now next is the newspapers. One moment.
Sir, what happened?
Yeah, you said something. Okay. Newspapers, magazines, and booklets. Your other forms of communication are newspapers, magazines, and booklets. Literate people in rural areas read newspapers for education, information, and entertainment. Newspapers like Dinamani, that's a Tamil one, Enadu, Matru in Kerala, Dinamala, Tamil Nadu, and Malayalam, etc., have simplified language for easy reading and understanding by the common man. These are some of a few examples. Okay, magazines and vernacular. Vernacular means language. Okay, vernacular languages are used by farmers and villagers. That is Telugu or whether it is Telugu, Tamil, Kannada or Malayalam or any language. Okay, magazines in vernacular languages are used by farmers and villagers for information about farming, health, and other issues. Noted social activist Bharat, uh, Bharat Dogra distributes the leaflets on several important issues dealing with, it's titled as the leaflets on several important issues dealing with welfare and development. Pamphlets are used by many social organizations to bring awareness to many societal issues and mobilize the public for a cause. Okay, now the other mode of powerful communication media is the television. Okay, let us go to. Okay, television was used as a tool to communicate development messages in Site, Jabua, Keda, and Krisi. These are some of the projects that was implemented for creating awareness among the rural segments. All the rural people, okay, all these experiments were successful in realizing the objectives. Television is very popular among rural people. In almost all houses with electricity, television is found in rural areas and tribal areas also. Television programs are, you know why uh, television is so powerful? Because even the unread, those who are not read or those who are illiterate, also can understand whatever is being communicated on the by the television media, isn't it? Because you don't need to be well read or you don't need to be literate to understand the communication. So it's got a more wider audience, a wider people who will be not only who will have access to television but also who can understand what is being telecast. Okay, because especially women. Television programs are avidly watched in rural areas. The impact of television programs on rural lives is found in many research studies. Especially women empowerment is seen in our society. In the post, the liberalization era, women's empowerment succeeded because of the media. Television, through its programs, has brought a revolution to rural India. Television is a powerful medium to influence the public if we compare it with other media platforms. हम लोग बुनियाद and all these are some of the programs which have become very popular. Okay, Mahabharat, Ramayana, Kandan, and all these are very old programs. They have become popular because of television, and Chanakya, etc. were popular programs which made an impact. Now we go to radio. Radio crosses literacy and just like television, radio crosses literacy and geographical barrier. Many people use the radio for information and entertainment. In remote areas, people are use radio as a primary source of information and edutainment. Edutainment, EDUTAINMENT. It's a combination of education and entertainment. Okay, that's why it is known as edutainment. Edutainment. Okay, as it is affordable to own and use. Community radio stations have also influenced by the narrow casting area. Means certain community radio stations are there which will telecast, which will be airing their programs only to certain communities in a rural, in a village. Okay, in a rural environment, there are radios which will communicate only to a particular community or a particular locality or a particular location. Okay, it is economical. Uh, we have what is called as community radio stations have also been influenced by the narrow casting. Narrow casting is it is confined to certain specific areas. That's why it is called as narrow casting. Okay, because the content is related to local issues. Community radio stations have also been influenced by the narrow casting area because the content is related to local issues. Deccan Development Society Sangam, community radio, and this is one example, and Radio Maven are a few there's a few examples which are used this community radio platform to convey information to the rural areas of the villages. Okay, then of successful community radio, Padi Pantalu is a successful radio program for the past several decades. These are all some of the examples that I'm talking about. For the past several decades, broadcast on All India Radio. Radio is inexpensive and is made of simple technology. It is economical and the production cost is less. Generally, radio's content is intimate and personal. Okay, there are limitations to the radio. Radio is an audio medium. Content invokes the imagination of the listener. Radio programs are broadcast on a fixed schedule. It is a one-way medium. There is no flexibility in the broadcasting of the program. Rarely programs are repeated, so listeners have to remember the content. See, these are some of the factors, advantages of radio. Radio's content is intimate and personal. There are limitations to the radio. Radio is an audio medium. Content invokes the imagination of the listener. These are some of the advantages of radio programs. Okay, radio programs are broadcast on a fixed schedule. It is a one-way medium. There is no flexibility in the broadcast of the programs. Rarely programs are repeated. So listeners have to remember the content if it is important for the use. As of today, radio has listenership in both cities and villages. Before the advent of television, radio was a very popular medium to gather or communicating information. Now let us go to the next communication, model, that is interpersonal communication. People in rural areas don't have a broad worldview as they are not highly educated and literate. Information gathering, analyzing, information gathering, analyzing, absorbing, and implementation are very less compared to urban areas by the rural public. They are dependent on opinion leaders to get wise advice. Okay, I'll just read it out again. People in rural areas don't have a broad worldview as they are not highly educated and literate. Information gathering, analyzing, absorbing, and implementation are very less compared to urban areas by the rural public. They are dependent on opinion. Rural public are dependent on opinion leaders to get wise advice. People can be informed, persuaded, and convinced with the help of interpersonal relationships easily. That's more on a personal level. See, interpersonal communication is more on a personal level. Okay, they mutually it is they have very good mutual relationships, and they are mutual respect and mutual understanding of the requirements, information requirements. Okay, so change agents and family members play a very important role in accepting the latest changes and propagating information among the rural public. Opinion leaders get information from mass media. So sometimes what happens is opinion leaders themselves, opinion leaders means those leaders in villages who communicate to the villagers. Okay, people of the village, and tell them about, give them advice, give them latest information. Okay, all these things, like whatever the requirements are, uh, the opinion leaders pass on the message or convey the message to the villagers. Okay, but they don't. Opinion leaders in turn, they get information from mass media, and they in turn pass the information to less active members of the society. So opinion leaders get the information from the mass media, maybe radio, maybe television, maybe newspapers, maybe other forms of, maybe even the digital media, and uh, pass that same information on to the villagers. Okay. Interpersonal communication is effective, specific, means it is interpersonal communication is always effective because it is also specific to the needs of a specific village or a specific population. Okay. It is instant because it is being conveyed immediately, personally. So it is instant, it is personal also, and it's also intimate. Like they know each other. So it's like a very smooth flow of communication when it is interpersonal communication. Okay, so agriculture extension workers and health workers use, even agriculture extension workers will come to our who the agriculture extension workers are in the following chapters also. Agriculture extension workers and health workers are use interpersonal communication to communicate relevant information. Interpersonal communication is also an art in itself. Okay, as it needs personal rapport with the people, like the opinion leaders or whoever is communicating information to the farmers or the rural population needs to have a very close relationship, in the sense they need to be respected, they need to be also whatever information they give it, they need to understand, and they also, so these things are very important in interpersonal communication. If there's a lot of differences between the person who's communicating and person who's listening, then the interpersonal communication will also fail. So there needs to be a very close attachment between the communicator and the receiver of the message in interpersonal communication, right? uh, as it needs personal rapport with the people and also is time consuming to win the trust of the targeted public. Now we are coming to the traditional and folk media. These are all different tools of communication, different formats or forms of communication. Okay, we have been talking about radio, we have been talking print media, electronic media, we are talking about television, we are we just talk about interpersonal communication. So these are different ways to or different forms of communication in rural areas. Okay, or where you can convey right from development message to social messages to the rural populations. Okay, so one of them, after the interpersonal communication, we come to tradition. Interpersonal involves communication between an opinion leader and the villagers. Here we have traditional and folk media. This is another way of conveying information and also communicating to the rural population. This is another very powerful media, traditional and folk media. In remote rural areas where access to mass media is not available, people, of course, it is not the case because people also use in other areas also. People use traditional and folk media for religious and edutainment purposes. Governments also embed development messages in traditional and folk media, as it is popular among rural people. This form of communication is more acceptable to the older generation than the younger generation. Traditional folk media themes emerge from tradition, culture, customs, religion, and rituals. As of today, the rural populace celebrates local festivals with much religious fervor. Weekly markets. We are talking about the rural communication again. Weekly markets can be another very effective form of communication. Weekly markets, they have what is called as santas or weekly markets in villages. Okay, in rural areas. Weekly markets are called by different names at different places. Like some call them hearts, HWATS. In the east and all that, they call them hearts, HWATS. Shanties and on santas. We hear in Telangana and Andhra, maybe we call them as santas. Okay, where the villages hold weekly markets. They bring the produce to the market and sell it to the people. Okay, people from different villages throng the weekly market for buying and selling of goods. Group communication and interpersonal communication takes place in the weekly market. Relatives exchange the well-being of family members living in different villages. Governments and business organizations use weekly markets to drive home their respective messages as huge populations congregate in one place. It is very economical and time-saving for organizations to utilize weekly markets to communicate important messages. Generally, villages are sparsely populated and scattered far and wide. Communication is challenging to the people residing in those areas. Marriage alliances, sometimes family reunions, and conflict resolutions take place in weekly markets. Okay, weekly markets is once in a markets held in rural areas once in a week. So they are called as weekly markets or santas. Group and interpersonal communication also take place in these. So there's a lot of communication exchange that happens in these weekly markets also, right? So I think I'll conclude here. And if you have any doubts, I'll clarify them. If you have any questions, please do ask me. Any
No,
questions?
sir. All is very good, sir.
It's clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you have no doubts.
No doubt,
Then
sir.
maybe today I'll conclude, and tomorrow we'll follow it up with one of the most important communication, as I told you earlier also, information and communication technologies, which has brought about revolutionary changes uh, in the among the rural populations. Okay, apart from the
Okay,
world. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Same time
okay,
we'll meet. Okay. Thank you very much,
okay.
and all the
Thank you, sir.
best.
Thank you.